Slack. All right, we're back. We are COMP1004, and it's the winter 2017 semester. We are week 3, part 1 of our broadcast, and we're going to talk about a couple things, activities that I want to do today. One of them is Lab 1 is out. It's worth 2% bonus, right? Which means if you don't do it, it's okay, right? I'm not going to stress you on it if you don't feel like starting your project. It's to your detriment, right? I'm paying you for it. I'm paying you to start and get your user interface done. If you don't want to, though, then it's a loss for you because 2% doesn't come very easily, right? What happens if you didn't do assignment 1 perfectly, or what happens when it's assignment 2, 3, or 4, or 5, and down the line you need an extra couple of points to push you from a 78 to an 80, right? This is the way to do it. You get bonus points, so it means attending class and knowing what I want and getting it done. Usually the labs will be in class, which means there will be no opportunity for you to do it outside of class. If you're not physically here or can't do it in the time frame, it's unfortunate, but that's why it's a bonus. It's not a negative, right? Same thing with quizzes. If I have a quiz in class, it'll be, let's say, a pop quiz. Something I want you to answer might be like 5 questions worth 1%, bonus, right? It won't be killing you. So if you don't get it right, that's okay. But for learning, sometimes there might be some concept I want you to know about, and we'll see how it goes throughout the semester. But again, these are bonus marks. The bonus will add up, believe it or not, 1%, 2% here and there. It can be worth quite a bit. And I won't be doing these checkpoints every single time, but this is the first assignment, and I think it's great, a great opportunity for you guys to show me that you started. Last week, again, I gave you some time to do it, even half an hour. So you should have been either fully started or mostly done. Who's mostly done their assignment 1? Some people want you to be mostly done, yeah. Because it doesn't take a lot, right? What about the actual functionality? Anyone do the functionality for assignment 1 completely? Yeah, there's some people who've already done that, and that's good. That means that you're ahead of the curve. Do I expect everyone to be done right now? No. There might be some questions, things you don't know how to do, which is I'm going to cover today, right? So I'm going to cover some of the things, some of the user interface aspects of assignment 1 today that you didn't get shown. And you had a question. What was your question? You had a question for me that you were asking.
My case, I made for it as a private.
It was for GitHub. So the question was, what do I make a public GitHub repository for Lab 1? Is that what you're talking about, or for assignment 1? Again, if you look at Slack, so I'm going to pull up the Slack channel. And again, for those people who were not here the first 2 weeks, please sign up for Slack. If you can't sign up for Slack for whatever reason, somehow your Georgian College email doesn't automatically sign you up, please see me at the break and we'll make that happen. I'll just send you an invite and we're good to go. But basically what it is if you look at COMP1004 in the general channels, if you look at the general channel, I've shared my videos from last week. So link to direct videos, someone asked me to do that. As well as if you look at some stuff, this thing here I shared with you last week, the GitHub Student Developer Pack, gives you the ability to do private and public as long as you can prove that you're a student. It doesn't take a lot. They ask you for a couple pieces of information, and then within a day or so you're approved. Worst case, my recommendation is private repos and make me a collaborator, right? So you just make me a collaborator on a private repo, and then your code is your own. No one can say that it's somebody else's. Again, anything I give you here in this course, there is no group work, okay? So this is not something that you share with anybody else. That means your code must be your own. And if it looks like somebody else's, very much, and by the way, I'm very good at detecting, like I said earlier, both of you will get 0, you and the other person, even if you have nothing to do with it. If it's too close, how do I know who did what? It's going to be very rare that one person or the other can prove that they didn't do anything. And usually I can tell because people, I'm going to tell you, who cheat and whatever and feed off of each other sit together. So, doesn't take rocket science to me to figure out who you are and where you took your stuff. Now I can see that there's 36 people signed up, to the Slack channel. So if you're not on here, please sign up. Again, I do some, things like this, dropping links onto Slack, some announcements if we have to do anything different with assignments or labs and that kind of thing. So please do that. And again, Lab 1 has been posted today. So I'll put that up. So I'll say Lab 1 posted today, due by end of day, and I'll put that in 11:59, right? And then this is it's a checkpoint, right? That's what it is. checkpoint for assignment 1. And I'll say, please see Blackboard, because we do assignments online on Blackboard. This kind of stuff is the kind of, little things that we're going to do with Slack, so people who are kind of working remotely can also get that message, especially if you're connected. Remember, you can download the Slack app for your machine, somewhat like Discord, right? For people who've used Discord before. I like it more than Discord. That's just me. That's why I use it. It's more of a professional app that's used in business, right? So that's why I use Slack, and it's quick. I can put quick links on there. I can drag and drop files, all kinds of stuff in here that are really quick. Doesn't take a lot of work to do. So Slack is one of the things we use. The other thing I talked about besides GitHub, so we talked about GitHub and Slack. All my slides, so for this week and last week, are posted up on Blackboard. I use Blackboard for the majority of content, right? I know some other professors use other kinds of content areas, and an example of that would be something like Piazza. I don't know, some people may have seen that, where they post some stuff up in different places. I'm okay with Blackboard, and that's where you're going to see a lot of your slides and those kind of things. So please look there. Also, if we do any kind of quizzes, that'll be up on Blackboard. Only things we use that we're going to use Slack for is really communication directly to me, communication between you and another student, so you guys with each other. There's also different channels where you can put things like code examples, code snippets. I might put a code snippet in here so I don't pollute the general channel sometimes, right, with code snippets. And random, you can put things like cat pictures and whatever else you want to share. Cthulhu, right, if you're a Cthulhu fan, right, or anything like that, D&D. I gotta toss those in there every time I kind of do a broadcast because I'm a D&D fan. All right, but other than that, that's what we're doing. I'm going to continue what we did last time, so I'm switching over here to Windows 10. Even though I'm using a Mac, I'm virtualizing Windows. Is it perfect when it comes to using Windows? Absolutely not. And if you're a Mac person, you're going to notice that, sometimes Windows doesn't work exactly as kind of advertised when it comes to virtualizing in a Mac. And some of the things that don't work well are any simulators inside Windows will fail. If you ever try and do a simulator inside of a VM, it's kind of like doing a VM in a VM. Can't work, right? So please, that won't work. Direct access to the video card, if you do anything like OpenGL or anything crazy like that, where you do anything greater than OpenGL 3, it will fail because you don't have access to the metal. It's a virtualized hardware that you have, right? It's like I do. So there's certain things that will work differently with me when I do my presentations and demonstrations than with you, right? But it'll be very similar. Now, I had a project that I did last week, and I'm going to bring that up for a second. Please just watch for now before I go into the PowerPoints. I want to show you something new today, which is how to create a template, right? And we're going to talk about this. This is required for your course, because when I give you your midterm exam, I will give you a solution, and you're going to create your own version of it, right? I give you things like this. I give you a bit of a package, so some code to start with, a code base, if you will. And then from there, you're going to modify it and then complete the code or fix the problem, that kind of stuff. And now that makes it for a very challenging exam. And why would that be very challenging? If I gave you a piece of code and said, fix it, why is that challenging? Why could that be challenging? Anybody? How about you? You're new too, right? This week? Are you new this week? Yeah. So tell me, what would it be? What would be the thing that makes, if I give you my code, what would that be challenging? Come on, answer. Give me your opinion.
So basically, like, you have to go through the whole code like what you have done and really have to figure it out from.
Right. You have to go and understand my code, right? It's someone else's code. Even if it's well documented and I tell you what I'm going to do, and even if I explain the exam, the challenge is it's not your code. It's my code, right? And whenever you look at somebody else's code, this is one of the challenges of doing the midterm, because I'm going to give you this. I'm telling you in advance. Remember, the midterm is happening. We're in week 3. The midterm is happening in 4 weeks, right? So that means week 7 will be our midterm, okay? So it's not going to happen, far away. You need to know certain things that we're going to be talking about by then. And you're going to do something live. You're building something, okay? It's not a multiple choice true false midterm. It's going to be open book, right? Again, it's going to be an individual midterm, but you're going to need to build something within 3 hours because that's the time we have together. One of the challenges is you have to build and test what I've given you. seen before. It's like kind of sight unseen. Now I'm going to prepare you. I'm not going to just say, oh yeah, here, you've never seen it before, figure it out. If you do assignment number 1, and if you do assignment number 2, you're going to be pretty well prepared for your midterm. All right. It's not like I'm going to put anything too much outside of assignment number 1 and assignment number 2 on the midterm. Right. You'll have access to all your files. You'll have access to all your code. You'll have access to my code. You'll have access to Google stuff on, Stack Overflow or whatever to figure things out. And that's good, but it's also bad because that means that I'm going to take that into account when it comes to timing. So I might ask you to do several different tasks, knowing that you have access to all this stuff, which is going to make your load a little heavier because you're going to be able to, you have all access to everything, right? And a lot of people say, well, Tom, open book is easy, right? Yeah, sometimes. But most of the time when the professor gives you open book, it's actually quite hard. So please, I'm telling you in advance, that's what it's going to be. So I got to show you this part because I'm going to give you a piece of code and you got to make it your own. And the way to do that is to do a template. So let's suppose I start off with last week's lesson, which is lesson 2. And I've got it here inside my start page, right? And you'll see that too. If you go up on Visual Studio, you'll see your start page should have a recent, any kind of recent projects you open will be listed there. My recent project, as you can see here, is lesson 2 from last week, COMP1004. This is the one, right? Right? It's going to open up my project, right? I don't want to start from scratch. I don't want to do that. I want to continue my calculator form because we have some examples of calculator buttons. And I've also got a bit of a design that I made from my calculator. This is the example that we made last week. For those of you who are interested in moving from here or continuing from here, we're gonna do this example today, and some of this is going to be the code that we're going to talk about today, how to declare variables and all that stuff, basic things for C# Essential training, which is what we're going to do today. C# Essentials number 1 or part 1. So I'm going to start from here, but I don't want to mess with my last lesson. I want to use this project as a code base for the lesson today, right? So I want to copy this stuff and I want to make my own. Now you might think it's easy. I just go to my folder and copy paste, right? And make another folder. Yes, but everything inside of it will say lesson 2. I don't want that. I don't want anything to do with lesson 2. For example, let's say you start off and you want to do your lab 1, but you want to make it based off assignment 1, right? You don't want to call it assignment 1 that you're handing me. You want to make it lab 1, let's say, as an example. Well, you have to rename everything furiously to do that. It's a lot of work, but it's far simpler just to do a template. And how do we do this? So there's a few steps. 1, first of all, you have to have a project. That's the first step. You have to have a project that you want to copy somehow. If it's a blank project, it's not going to help you. Right? Don't even do a template. But if you have something in your project like this, where you have some kind of design, you have a form, some classes that you want to copy and so on, and that you want to start from, you want to go to File, right? And I'm going to go to Export Template. So that's in the File menu. All right, it's not like it's a hidden function. This is where Microsoft Visual Studio, to me, as a development environment, is really cool because it has a lot of built-in stuff like this, where you can generate code and do templates and all that stuff really easily. So notice it says it's a project template. I could do an item template as well. We may cover that at some other point. Like for example, if I wanted to create a new dialogue or something like that, I'm going to make a project template. So I want to kind of make a copy of my project. Based on my current project, I want to make another project. That's what I'm doing here. Notice that I can also pick, if I had multiple projects in my solution. Remember, solutions are just containers in Visual Studio. You can have multiple projects. For example, I could have a test project that's separate. It has nothing to do with my actual my runtime project, where I can use the test project to test my code. So I can have multiple projects inside my solution. Right now, we've only have one, and it starts here. So up here on this line, you can see this is the solution, right? Which is the same name as my project. That may not always be the case. Okay, so here's my project part right here. It's my project container, and I only want this part to be copied, right? So I'm going to click next because this is the default one, right? I only have one. Now it's going to ask me for the template name. I could leave it this way if I want, or I can make it so that it's like calculator template. So let's say, for example, I said COMP1004, and I wanted to call this calculator template. I could do that, right? But I'm going to keep it the same because I want it to have the same form, 2017 dash, and then some kind of lesson, right? I'm not going to put lesson 1, 2, 3, 4 because I'm going to change this later. You're going to see. I could put a template description to make it easy for me to find this. If I wanted to search this out, I could put something like, you know, template for, you know, lesson, or for the calculator lesson, So that way, you know, the one thing I could do is put lesson dash something like calculator. I don't know. Something that's descriptive. Now I'll talk about how this is going to appear later. I could create an icon image if I have an image for my icon, how it's going to appear inside my project template options, right? I can have also a preview image, which could be a screen cap of what my project would look like. I could do that too. Okay, I could do those things. I'm not going to do them. I don't even have to do this part. All I need is this, the first part. All right, so when I create a template, I just need this. I'm picking a project, and guess what I'm doing now? Finish. That's it, right? Now, on my machine, when I click finish, right, what it's going to do, first of all, I'm virtualizing, right? So when I click finish, it's going to wait, and I'm going to wait for my File Explorer to come up. When my File Explorer comes up like this, I'm done. On your machine, if you're using a native machine, this won't be the case most likely. It'll come up with a list of a zip file. You might see the zip file with the same name. Please don't delete that zip file, move it, or anything. That is your template. Leave it alone. Just close down this File Explorer window, and you're okay. Okay? Now, once I've got this template done, all I need to do now is File, close my solution. Closing the solution, what it does is it shuts down that solution container, so there's no solution loaded. Okay, that's step 3. So again, step 1, you must have a project. Step 2, step through the export template wizard. Okay. Step 3, close your solution and make sure you close that file. Step 4, I want to make a new project. Here we go, right? So File, New Project. When I go to New Project now, I'm not going to select one of these ones. I want to scroll all the way down and have a bunch of templates. Notice that my template icon is different, right? And I have ones from last semester, right? So they don't look like this. If you notice, my normal template icon would look like this. It has a little C# icon or whatever. But the ones that look like templates actually have a little dash border around them, right? And if I scroll down, I want to find one that says W. It's probably going to be at the bottom somewhere, right? Because it's here, somewhere in here, right? In this insanity, right? That I call my thing, right? My templates. But what if you can't find it? Well, here it is. But what if you couldn't? You can always go up here and just type it in. So I can say something like comp as a filter 1004, right? If you do that, it only shows the comp 1004 templates, right, that you'd have. And I'm going to choose, of course, the one that I want, which is this one. Notice how now it colors what it looks like down here. My name changes to the minimum stuff that it has here, right? So, for example, it says, well, my name of my project is going to be this. This is the first line. I could change the name of my solution if I really wanted to. I don't have to, right? I'm definitely going to share things on Git. So you're going to have, remember, if you haven't done this before, please make sure that add to source control is checked by default. You should have already done that by now, week 3, right? And what I'm going to do is rename this file here. Instead of calling it calculator1, I just put that there for just to show you can do that, to lesson 3, right? That's what I'm going to do. Now, in an exam, I'm going to give you something that says COMP1004 W2017 midterm, right? That's what you're going to get. And you're going to take that little code base, create a template of your own, and add on your student number at the end. So it'll be like comp 1004 W2017 midterm dash, and then your student ID, right? So it's going to be kind of a longer project name. Why? Because now I can identify that it's you, right? It's easier for me to look at it and say, oh, this is the student, and so on. Some people, for whatever reason, change that whole thing and put their names. I don't want your name. I want your student ID in there, because you can upload it to your Dropbox anyway, and I know it's you, right? But I want your name and your student ID to match. All right, so you're going to create directory. I'm going to click OK, right? Now, what is this going to do? I've got the exact thing I had from lesson 2, but it's called lesson 3. It's all been renamed nicely for you. So it's renamed all the namespaces. It's everything says lesson 3 on it. I don't have to do all that heavy lifting anymore. If I really wanted to, I could do all that, but it's just a pain in the ass. And sometimes it just won't work, right? You'll screw up your namespaces. Your project may not work. Let me just close this down. I don't need this anymore. All right, so review. Last week we created a calculator, and if I run the calculator right now, if I press start, right? When I press start, what happens is, just to reiterate, there's a couple of things that go on. One of the things that happens when I press my calculator, first of all, I have a bit of a problem, yeah? Should my project really do this? What do we talk about? When you do a user interface where you want a fixed user interface, do not allow resizing. Should it do this? No, right? I shouldn't allow my window, if it's going to be a calculator, it should look like a calculator, which means I got to limit that somehow. So question, we're talking about now we're looking at the form properties. And again, all my properties in Visual Studio on the right-hand side here. Which property do I change, right, to make it so that I cannot resize my screen? Yes?
It's a minimum size, maximum size.
I could do that. What's another one easier than that? You know? Anyone know what that is? There's actually one property you need to change to stop it all, right? Nope. Lock just locks your design, right? Nice guesses though, but what it is actually, if I go to form border style, notice that the form border style is sizable. All I got to do is change that to, but it was a good guess for min-max would work. Fixed single would make it work fine, right? So if you go fixed single, you're golden. It won't work now. So if I press run again, now notice I'm pressing start, but I can also do debug. If I go to debug, that's another way to start the project, and it'll build. I can also do build. So if I do a build by itself, remember, we're looking at compilation. C# is a compiled language. It's going to link and build everything together in the background, right, and build your executable file. All right, I want to talk about that from a file structure perspective. It actually builds an executable that you can share with somebody else, right? Now I can do a build solution, right? If I did a build solution, notice on the bottom it says build succeeded on the bottom left when I build my solution. If it failed, it'll come up with some errors, right? I can also do debug, and if I just press the start key, the start button here, which is start, the play button I like to call it, right? It actually does this. If I go to debug, it actually does this one, start debugging, right? You don't have to do start debugging. You can also choose start without debugging. Start without debugging actually works faster because I don't have a debugging window in the background. If I don't want to debug, if I just made one simple change, nothing to debug, I want to have my debugging information and I can still start going, right? But it'll still build. It'll always rebuild your project. It won't stop you from rebuilding your project, right? But sometimes start without debugging is faster. Let me show you what I'm talking about here. So start without debugging, bam. See how fast that was? Now let me show you the difference between that one and start. A little bit slower. And look at this other information that comes up. There's all kinds of additional information here, which you may not need. Now let's see if I can resize my screen. Can I? No. You can see that my mouse pointer doesn't change when I go to the border, so I don't get any of these resize handles that I'm used to, right? So it won't allow me to do that. Okay, I can still maximize though. How do I take away the maximization option from my screen? I want to stop maximizing. I don't want to let myself maximize my screen or the user. I want to control that experience. What do I change to stop the ability for me to have a maximize option? Anybody?
I forget what it's called exactly.
You already know this is the first time you're in class, and he knows more than.
I had to watch 18 different resources to get this done. I actually finished the visual thing. Anyway,
you're awesome.
There's a
That's great.
box and a max box.
Yes.
It's a property.
And sorry, I'll ask you next. I know how you had your hand up, but you're absolutely correct. I think so. Please put your hand up next time for the answer. Okay, I'll ask another one like that. Another simple one like that. Okay, so maximum size is this one. Well, the maximize box is here, and it's slated to true. What you want to do is turn this to false, and then that won't allow you to maximize anymore. You can also turn, if you really want to be extreme, you can also turn the control box off, which means that this whole title bar is gone, if you really want to. But that means you can't even close your file down. You have to kind of create an exit button or something, right? And we'll talk about that later. All right, so that's one. So fixed single, and we changed our maximize, the maximize option. If you scroll down here, so if we go to, and it's all alphabetical, maximize box, we turned it to false. And now if I run, so if I press Control F5, right, which is run without debugging, right, because that's all we've done. Now you can see that it's grayed out, right? And it makes sense for this kind of user interface, right? Finally, you know what? It makes sense for the user interface you're building for assignment 1, probably for assignment 2, 3, 4, and 5, right? It's going to be working for everything. So, kindly think about putting that in play, because, the maximize box, unless you're doing something that can be maximized. For example, a window that contains other windows, like This Visual Studio is a window that can possibly contain other containers and windows. They look like panels, right? But in effect, they are additional windows that are the children of the parent window, right? Okay, we're not going to get there yet, but I'm telling you, that's the only time you want to maximize, right? Because the parent window should take up most of the space. Or if you're making some kind of multimedia thing, like, you know, some kind of video player, you probably want to maximize the screen, or something that you want to show graphically. Okay, so we've got our little thing working. If I press the buttons, I've got some kind of functionality here. But remember, the exercise was trying to make our calculator work. I can put 2 decimal places. You know, that's a problem, right? Let's talk about our code a little bit before we get into the meat and bones of what we're doing today on the PowerPoint side. What do I do? So I've got if the functionality, you know, if I look at a calculator that really works, here's a, you know, Windows calculator, there's a standard calculator in Windows. By the way, I don't care about these things, right? Or, you know, the extra functionality here that I got, right? I don't care about those. I just care about this stuff, right? So how it should work is 1 plus, if I do plus 2, notice that I've got one operation up there. I don't have to show that if I don't want to. I'm not asking for that. 1 plus 2 is equal to 3. Does the calculation, right? That's easy to do. We can start with that. I can also do in Windows, the Windows calculator, I can go 1 plus 2 plus 3 minus 5 divided by 4, multiplied by 8, you know, as an example, you know, divided by 1.5. I can't press the extra dot again when I press it one time, and then equals. And then you get some really weird, you know, answer, right? So I can do all that, right? And that's what we need to kind of do with our calculator today. So how do I do all that? How do I code this? What's good practice? That's what we're going to talk about. And I want to get some of the information from you, right? So you've already started or thought about how to do this from last week, or if you finish your calculator on your own as a homework assignment. Remember I talked about, hey, take it home and try and finish it if you can. We can talk about how this goes. So let's talk about ideas. Remember that there are, in math, there are 2 parts of any operation you do in your calculator, right? Think about a function. You're performing a function, right? So really we're talking about functions here, right? So I do the addition function. I'm taking 2 numbers, right? And then when I click the addition function, I'm going to perform the calculation, whatever the calculation is. Okay. So I'm doing a calculation. Great. I have 2 things. One of them is called an operand. The operand is the number that we're going to be using, right? It could be an integer number. It could also be a floating point number at this point, right? Those are the 2 types of numbers. And then we have an operator, plus, minus, multiply, divide, and even equals is an operator, right? The equals operator. So all those things are operations we want to do. Plus, we have a couple of additional functionalities. One is the backspace. So if I want to kind of click the backspace, the C, which clears, right? Those 2 functions I want, right? All right, first, let's do the simplest one. How do I differentiate? Someone's drinking. That's what I was saying. It's pop. Don't worry. How do I change? First of all, if I go to my solution here, right? Remember, my code is inside the code behind file, right? There's always a file that is linked to the design. This is design time. We're in design time. So from a design time perspective, we have this view. We show our user interface. And if you guys did assignment number 1, you would have had the user interface side. But we also have the code behind side, right? And I can get to that in various ways. If I right click here, right, you can see that I can go view code. The little shortcut is F7. It tells you what the shortcut is, right? View code brings up the class that's associated with the design side. And we put some stuff inside the class last week. We have it here. Now, for you, if you're following along for the first time, you're going to be lost, right? You're going to go, oh, man, Tom, isn't there some way you can share my code? And how am I going to do that? GitHub. So before I continue, I'm going to go to Team Explorer here, right? And I'm going to go to changes. I have made some changes. My project, I actually have a local repository already started, right? And I've talked about what a repository is, but there's 2 parts. There's the local repository that's tied into your machine with a revision control system called Git, and there's the remote repository we're going to link to, in this case, GitHub, which is a cloud service that's going to house our files, right? So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to put a kind of a note. It's a commit message. A commit is just a snapshot of my current projects, the state of my current project. I've made a change. I changed a couple options. I changed my border doesn't change, and I don't allow it to maximize. So I can say, constraint border maximization and resizing. You can do whatever you want here. Some kind of message is what you want to put in here, right? That's the change I made, and I can commit all. I must have a change in order for me to make a commit. I have a change, commit all. There we go. So that's the second commit or third commit that I have here. Now, next, notice that down here on the bottom of my screen, we talked about GitHub, I have two pieces of information. One, the name of my master branch is right down here, right? The name of the branch that I'm using is right here, right? Master. Okay, so those two things are linked. This is the local repository. This is the master branch. If I click on these things, you can see that it's going to go to Visual Studio Team Services to try and connect me. That's not what I want. I want to go to Home. I want to go to Sync. And if you've downloaded and installed the Git repo, the Git extension for Visual Studio, different than this. How is this a problem? This looks like it's kind of weird. I didn't see this last time, right? Take a look. If I click Sync, I have this other thing that says Publish to Remote Repository. That's not what I want. And I've done a couple of things to get that so you guys can see it with me. I need to go to Extensions and Updates. And if I look at kind of all, and if I search for Git, right, notice that I really don't have my extension kind of loaded in anymore, right? I want to put it up. So how do I do that? I want to search online, Extensions and Updates, and I want to search for Git. Here's Git. And I want to look for the Microsoft extension. Here it is, GitHub Extensions for Visual Studio. What I've done, just to show you this, is remove it. You can remove and you can put back anything you want in Visual Studio. So here I'm just going to download the Visual Studio extension, right? If you don't have this, you'd need it. That's why I'm showing you what to do for people who asked me last week. Click Install. And what it's going to do is it's going to install a new extension or plugin is really what it is into Visual Studio. I'm going to extend the functionality of Visual Studio to have a brand new plugin. It asks you to restart now. I'm going to do that, and it's going to open me up back in my project if everything went well. So please, let's see that. Yes. No, shouldn't. Unless you updated something, and then if you updated, it may rewrite or remove it. And if it does, put it back, right? Again, do I need the GitHub extension? Me? No. I can do things with command line, right? But I'm trying to make it easier for you guys. So, and there is Git integration with Visual Studio. Add it in, and it's a nice little extension that makes it easier for you to publish. However, you could use the built-in Git extension. You just have to pass in the remote information, the GitHub remote, and I'll show you that too. All right, so here I'm in Team. I'm back in my project. I'm going to share it with you now. I'm going to go to Home. One day, when it lets me, I'm going to go to Sync. And now I should have a different picture here, this thing, right? Publish to GitHub. I'm going to click Publish to GitHub. And if everything works well, it should point something like my project should be called Lesson 3. I don't want to make it, this is me. I have my own projects, right? It's not going to go here. It should go into Georgian College. I have my own Georgian College GitHub organization. And then if I scroll down, there's an area for publishing. If I click Publish, if everything goes well, we should publish directly to the github.com/Georgian College organization. Let's check that to see if that worked. All right, so I'm going to go to GitHub. Please forgive me if I've done this a couple of times. I need to repeat this for people who are new. And I know I'm going a little slower, in this part, but this is the piece that always messes people up, right? Because they're like, Tom, I don't know how to do my GitHub. I've shown you like 3 weeks in a row now, right? Different ways of doing it. All right, let's take a look. So here's COMP1004, Winter 2017. Let's make sure that this is the correct one. Well, you can see that this is done 4 minutes ago. This little constrained border maximization and resizing, that was the effect that I had on my project. And if you look at GitHub, it tells you which files were changed. In this case, I changed the calculated form designer. That's what changed. You can also go, if you go back to code and click on commits, you can see that there are 3 commits. These 2 were created by Microsoft. So whenever you create a brand new Visual Studio project, Microsoft creates 2 commits. This one, the add in the git ignore and the git attributes files, as well as all the project files that made up your base project. Those are the two things that Microsoft does for you. And then my new one is this one. All right, that's the one I made. So you should have 3 commits. Now, what I recommend before we continue is please download my project. There's a couple ways to do that. If I go to code, I can always click, clone or download. I could do that, right? If you're, and if you click on this, you can see that there's a couple of options. There's open in desktop. Open in desktop actually downloads everything and opens it up in your desktop tool. In order for you to do open in desktop, you must have downloaded and installed the desktop version of the GitHub tool, the user interface that comes with GitHub. And for those people who don't know what that is, you have to get that through desktop.github.com. Right? So desktop.github.com is a user interface. You don't like using command line. And if somehow your Visual Studio integration doesn't work properly or you're not happy with it, you can use the user interface to help you connect and share on GitHub. Option 2, open in Visual Studio. That's neat. So it'll actually open it up physically in Visual Studio Direct. That's neat. Option 3, download zip. So that's like no frills. You download the project, you unzip it, and after you unzip, you must unzip it. If you try and open it up and use it in compressed mode, it will fail. You have to physically unzip it. Please use something like 7-zip. Don't just click inside of there, the compressed version, and run the compressed side. It will not work properly. It'll fail. You must unzip it. So that's the other option. There's a third option. You could always fork it. Fork me on GitHub, and that sounds funny, but if you fork the repository, it actually creates a copy in your own repository. So you have your own GitHub account. You actually create a copy of my files in yours. And why would you want to do that? The main reason is if you want to make changes to mine and send me the changes and say, hey, Tom, here's an example of some stuff that I've added. What do you think? And that whole process is something called a pull request, right? You kind of send a pull request to me, and if I agree, because I'm the original owner of the repo, I can include it or merge it in with my files. We're not going to do that in this course. I'm just telling you that yes, it is possible when you're collaborating with somebody else. We do a lot of that kind of thing. For now, for this course, all I expect you to do, just like I said last time, is the following: make a GitHub repo. Work with GitHub, right? Don't just use it as backup. Putting it up on GitHub is only one step. In order for you to get full credit, you must use GitHub in your process, which I'm going to show you here, right? Like notice how I added that one extra commit because I added a feature. We talked about a feature to limit my size of my user interface, and there it is. I want to keep doing this throughout the time that we're working together, and I'm going to do that now. Going back to Visual Studio, I want to add clear functionality, so clearing functionality. I want you to take note of the following. We're working within a class. So all forms are classes. Notice that I have a namespace. This is the package. If you're a Java developer, or if you've never done Java before, this is equivalent to a package. And notice again that when we have a public class, that it's partial. I talked about this week 1. And that there's the other side of this class, because we can break classes up in C#, is the designer side, which I don't want to touch right now. Okay? But for now, notice that I have a constructor. Here's my constructor, right? If I want to add comments to any method or constructor, and by the way, comments are required for assignment number 1. I asked you to put comments in your code. All I have to do in C# is do a // What it does is it automatically creates a summary, a little summary XML. That's what it does. This is an XML tag, right, that it creates. And I can say something like, default constructor, because that's what the default constructor is now for my class, right? Because I'm inheriting from class form. Notice that the colon here, this colon, means extends. That's what this means. So if you're someone who's coming from Java, and you all should have come from Java, and you all should have some kind of idea of object-oriented programming by now, yeah? Right? Then you should know something like this. It should read like this. Hey, declare my public class calculator form, which extends the form superclass. That's what this means. Okay? Here I have my constructor, which is the default constructor for my form, which initializes all my components on my user interface. That's what this does. And this initialize component method, right, this class method, is included automatically for you in a form in another document. Remember I talked about this on the Solution Explorer. If you open this up, if you expand this, you can see that there is a calculator form designer. I'm not going to click there yet. My calculator form designer has the second part of my class. Okay, so I've added some basic comments. What about if I want to add comments like I've asked? Well, I could add comments on my own. And there's comments in C# can be done in 3 different ways. I can do the // right? // actually special comments. It's like Java docs, right, in some ways. So whenever I look at a class now, if I hover over this, it'll actually tell me that this is the default constructor. Notice that's inside here. For those people who are here in class, you can see me pointing. See where it says default constructor? I made that, right? That's what comes up. That's Java. It's almost equivalent to little code hinting. And the same thing goes with the calculator button click event that I made last week. Notice it says event handler for calculator buttons. That's what I typed there. That's how it's going to appear. This is great for passing on information of classes from one user to the other. It kind of helps users understand what your methods and everything do. And that's why I'm getting you to do some simple comments, okay, like this. This was automatically generated, by the way, last week. I'll show you that again by, kind of putting in the // it generates all this. And notice it kind of found the parameter sender and the parameter name E, right? Because they're included here in my method signature, right? My method signature means how my method is defined. My method, which is like a function, it has a access modifier, private, public, or protected are the most common, right? Some kind of return type. In this case, it returns void, as well as the name. This is a named method. There are anonymous type methods as well called delegates that you can create in C#. We're not going to get there yet. But we have a name method here, and we have in parentheses a list of parameters. There are 2. There is the sender parameter as well as the E or event parameter. That's what we call a method signature. And in other languages, it's almost exactly the same. If you've ever programmed any other C-style language, Java, C, C++, even JavaScript and PHP to some degree, you're going to get the same kind of style of syntax, okay? Okay, so now we've done a couple things. One, we've created a button. We've kind of indicated that we're making a reference to a button called calculator button. That's our own. And when we use the equals operator here in C#, what we're doing is we're saying, hey, take the sender object that's coming into our method, cast it as a button. We use the as keyword, the special keyword that allows us to cast one object, sender, as another one, button. Button is the superclass for all buttons in C#, Windows forms, right? And then we're taking the sender object, a reference to it, we're passing it to calculator button as a reference. Passing it by reference, not by value. What's the difference between passing by value and passing by reference? Said a lot of stuff there. Sorry, are you talking? Are you answering? What's the answer?
Passing by value is like making a copy. When you change in the function, it doesn't change the outside.
Okay, I like that answer. What else? What's passing by reference?
Passing by reference is like sending the parting to the memory, so when you make change local
Correct.
and outside, it's bullshit.
Very good, very. So the answer is the object usually, or passes some kind of literal value, right, into the other object, right? That's what it does. So it's pass by value. Pass by reference is actually passing a pointer. And people don't understand what a pointer means. It actually points to the memory location of where that object lives, right? So example, in this case, I'm pointing to the memory location of sender. And when I do that, that means that calculator button can be treated as the sender object. It's actually looking at the same memory location. And because it's the same memory location comes with a bunch of attributes. It comes with where the data is stored and the type. And because the type of the sender object is a button, so too now is the calculator button, because it's a reference to a button that's in memory. Whew, right? And if you don't understand that, we're going to do more of that. But when we pass by reference, we're really referring to another object, and we're storing the address information, not the value, inside of our calculator button in this case. Okay, that's the second thing we've done, right? And then here we've done this. We said, hey, we have a result text box.text. Result text box is this one. That's the result text box. And if you want to see that, again, this is just review from last week. If I scroll all the way up, you can see that the result text box is called result text box, right? And that's how I like to name my objects and controls, variables, results, which is what this thing is going to give us, text box, which is the type of text box. the type of control that I've included in my form. Yes, it's long-winded. Yes, there are other ways to put that together, but I prefer this way because it's very clear. All right, and then I'm saying this. I'm saying plus equals. This is a shortcut operator, and you see this in any other C-style language, Java, C++. You also have it in JavaScript, PHP. You have it in Python. I can keep going. There's all kinds of languages that have it out there. It's very similar. And what it does is it's a shortcut operator to say something like this. Normally, you could write this as result text box.text is equal to the current value of result text box plus the value of my calculator button.text, whatever that calculator button is. So whatever button I pressed, whatever the text value of my calculator button is, I've added it into my result text box. Whatever it was, I just added on. Now, this is great behavior, but it's not exactly what I want. When I click my button or my operator, I want it to replace what's in the text box, not add on to it. So this has to be changed, this functionality here, right? So I don't want it to plus equals. I want it to equal, right? To some degree. We're going to come back to this function, this calculator button click thing. Here's the other thing I want to do. I want to be able to detect. I want to have some way of detecting all the buttons that I'm pressing. I already know what they are, right? But it depends on if I have a button, a regular button, and if I have like an operator or an operand. I want to be able to detect the difference, right? So here's where I come to a decision point. And I'm going to ask you guys this from a logical perspective. You guys are all developers, right? You're going to help me. I'm the client. Or maybe I don't know much about programming. And I'm going to ask you the question. Should I have one function for all of my buttons? Or do you think it's logical for me to break my function up into two sides? One for operators and one for the operands. Do you think that there's any value in doing that? Just putting it out there to you. I want to understand your coding style. You're the new guy. What do you think? What's your name?
Michael.
Michael, what do you think? Do you think it's this is the $64,000 question, right? Do you want to, would you have one method to handle everything, or would you have multiple methods, one for operators and one for operands? And why would I do that?
I would have one function.
Okay, like this.
And then I would make it do all the buttons that I click.
Uh-huh.
And the reason for this
Yes.
is because I wanna be able to write an exception sometime if you want to add a menu or something to change the properties.
I like that. I like the thinking. Okay. So the answer Michael had for those people who are remote who are watching this thing is he'd only have one function, right? And he liked that because you could put exception handling in place just in case you want to add some other kind of functionality. Menu is what you mentioned and something else. Anyone else have any other opinion other than Michael? Can anyone else support the other side of things? Multiple methods and why you'd want to do that, right? It's okay to say that because there's, no answer here is really wrong. Okay. We're going to talk about best practices and overhead, all right, a little bit too, but I want to see someone else. Does anyone think that you should use two methods? Put up your hand. Nobody? Okay, one person. There we go. Why would you want to use two methods?
Then we can separate the numbers from the operators, and we can make numbers separate them as operators.
Okay.
We can check if the decimal is pressed twice or the plus sign is checked.
Okay. All right. I could do that. So that's the other reason. The other reason is a simple way of separating the two. I don't have to do a check. I don't have to do an if statement to say if I'm a calculator, an operand, or if I'm an operator, right? And where do I store that information anyway? How do I store I'm an operator or I'm an operand, right? Operand means number or decimal. Operator means plus, minus, multiply. I don't have to separate those two things, right? How would you do it if I had one method?
I would have a separate function, I think.
So you'd have to set up a separate function anyway. Right? See what I'm saying? See where I'm going with this? Might be a better way. I'm just going to put it out there as an option. I'm not saying it's good or bad. You could do it with one function, and there's little tricks we can make to do all this stuff. Okay. The question I have for you is, if I go back to my designer, is there something that I can place to make the numbers somehow differentiated compared to my operators? Look at our properties. These are all the properties of all the buttons, and all the buttons share the same properties. We have an accessible descriptor, right? We have an accessible name. We have extra stuff in here that we can do. We have auto mode. Oh, by the way, there's one thing that I asked you to do last time, which was, please, for whatever reason, make sure your auto scale mode is none because they don't want it to scale. That's the form itself. But if you look at this, right, I have some additional things here. Some modifiers, private and public, if I really want to make them. size, tab index, tab stop, a tag. Take a look at this. Look at this tag, right? By the way, this tag exists in iOS, in Android, if you're doing Android programming, and in other languages, especially in Unity, if you're making a game. There's also tags, a tag name, if you will. Tag gives us the ability to separate, to give you one function without having to make two, and still differentiate, still do that. If the tag is operator, then do this. If the tag is operand, then do this. And if it's something else, then do this, default, right? That kind of functionality. So how do I select everything that's a button or some kind of operation, you know, whatever, and how do I do that? Well, I would probably select more than one button. Follow me here when I do this. So I'm going to click on these buttons all together. You can see I can click all of them, as well as this. This is kind of like an operand, but not really. I'm going to kind of put it in there anyway. And this is also kind of like an operand, but not really, right? I could put that in there. I'm going to unclick those for now, only the buttons, right? And what I want to do is in tag, notice that tag is still there, but I've made multiple selections. I'm going to change this to operand. And I can kind of type it in there, operand. We can also kind of put something else in there like number. Operand is kind of a neutral word. It doesn't clash with any other variable name. You know, that's why I'm using it. All right, operand. So each of these buttons now has a tag of operand, which means I can check for it. I'm storing information inside of my button, right? It's a property now of these buttons, and I can check for it. I don't need an extra method if I don't want it. Although nothing's wrong with using an extra method to split up code for clarity. That's why we would use it, to split up code. And I like the thinking behind that. I also like the thinking behind trying to use one method to, you know, to rule them all, kind of thing. That's a kind of a good way of doing it too, right? All right, now let's add the operators. So I want this one, this one, this one, this one, and maybe even this one. I would say these are all operators, right? And now if you notice on tag, it's not the same. I can change this to operator. There we go. So all those are operators. Now I have a way of checking. What about if it's not an operator and if it's not, you know, an operand? Because really a dot's not really an operand, right? It kind of gives us, it's a modifier. That's what it is. So is this, right? Because it's the backspace. I can do it as a modifier, right? And really, so it's clear, because clear kind of modifies or resets everything, whatever you want to call it. They're other, right? And I think we should classify them still, but we shouldn't call them operand or operator, to be clear. So I'm going to call them other. So I'm going to kind of, you know, check these three things. And in my tag, there are other kind of things, other things we can do. They're going to be modifiers. They're going to be the clear button, all that stuff. Okay. Now I have a great way of separating my code, right? Because I can check. I can say case. I can use a switch case, right? And I can say something like this. If case, if my tag, so it'll be my button dot tag, calculator button dot tag is equal to, you know, if it is a other, then do this. If it is a operator, then do that. If it is an operand, then do one of the functions, right, that I want to go to. So I'm going to make different functions. Maybe I don't have to even, right? We'll talk about that. Let's check this out and see how it works in code. So I'm going to go back to the code side, right? And I have this. I wouldn't do this anymore, right? I wouldn't do this anymore. I'm going to do a switch case. Now, switch statements, if you've seen them in Java, is very similar to what we see in C. I need to use the switch keyword, right? I know I'm getting ahead of myself in the book, but please bear with me. And so I'm going to switch something, right? What am I going to switch? Calculator button dot tag, right? That's what I want to look at, right? So it's going to be calculator button. Oops, if I can spell. So there's calc. If I press control space, right, or control dot, sorry, control dot, it should give me a generic, you know, kind of a reference. It gives me code hinting if I don't have it already. If I didn't calculate, if I press escape, by the way, I can escape that. If I start typing calculator, right? So calculator button. You're not getting code hinting, it's okay, right? Dot, and then tag, right? There's my tag. That's what I'm switching. So I'm switching my calculator tag. I can put it in brackets if I want. Okay, now this is going to return a string, and I need some kind of form like this. Now, why is it giving me an error? Can you guess why it's giving me an error? It says a switch up expression or case label must be a bool, char, string, integral, enum, or corresponding nullable type. Do we know that tag for sure is a string? never assume anything. So what should I do if I want to make sure that this switch statement, right, sees that the calculator button dot tag property is a string? I want to treat it like a string. What do I do? Yes. I could do toString, and I could also do, that's the fast way, or I could also use as. I could also do the as thing. I could go as string, right? I could do that, right, which would save me, right? ToString I like because it would just be that's what I like a lot, a change statement, right? I could do dot toString because toString, I have to make it like this, converts any property, the result of any property or method into a string, right? So if it's a method, the result of the method can be translated into a string, and if it's a property, it changes it into a string, right? So toString is okay. So now I'm switching a string, which I'm allowed to do in C#. In C++, does anyone know, can I switch a string? No, you can't do it with C#, C++. There's other special things you have to do from a comparison perspective with C++. You can make your own, you'd have to make your own class or a structure to do that. All right, in Java, you can do this too. Now the next thing is a series of case statements. So case and the value is for operand. So case operand, then do something, right? And inside the break statement, right? So case operand. Notice that it gives me a little bit of an error. Can I use single quotes when I look at a string in C#? And the answer is no. When I'm looking at a string, and this is a character single quotes, string double quotes for C#. That's the way it has to be. So too, by the way, for JavaScript. JavaScript doesn't care. All right, and now I can copy paste, right? Because I'm kind of just setting together my structure. All I do when I first program, let's give you my insight here. I kind of create my structure and then I modify it afterwards. It's a lot easier, and if I copy paste, it saves me finger typing errors, right? Because if I try to do it by my hand, maybe I made an error, you know, with my cases or breaks, and I can speed up this way. Rapid application development is the name of this course. All right, so this would be operator, right? And this could be, if I really wanted to make it other. And if I really want to, I could also have a default case, right? I could call it case default, right? And then whatever, right? We might want to use that later. Okay, so anything between this colon and the break, consider that a code block. So what I want to do is when I type the operand, there's a couple things. I need to keep track of operand number 1 and operand number 2. Because whenever I do a function, if I add 1 plus 1, I need 2 operands, the 1 and the other 1, or the 1 and a 2, let's say, or something. I need 2 operands. And I want to keep track of that class-wide, okay? So it's going to be a class member variable. Now, do I want to use a private instance variable for this, or should I make it public? And what would you recommend? If you go back to the object-oriented design methodology, when we talk about information hiding, does the user really care how the function happens? Do they need to look under the hood here to figure out how it goes? So should I make it public or private? Private, right? From a philosophy perspective, unless I want to share my data with the outside world, my operand, private member variable, a private field that's only available within the class structure itself, all right? So I'm probably going to put it somewhere up here, underneath the class definition, constructor. I usually like to separate my constructors with some kind of, you know, thing that says constructors, you know, one of those, maybe some little bit of code. Some people will say, don't do it, don't put any of this stuff, this decoration you're going to have to fix later on. No, I'll make a single line. I don't make a little box. If you're someone who likes to make boxes and stuff like that, no, I don't agree with that. I'm making a little line that says, here's all my constructor section. That's okay, right? And up here, what I want to do is I want to put something that says private instance variables, which is what we're going to create. Now, I want direct access inside of my class to a private instance member or variable or field, whatever you want to call it. This is okay for direct access because I'm sharing it out. But some of you may still want to make it public, right? Because you want to make some kind of setter, right? And especially for things like, you may want to put getters and setters in there. For now, let's leave it as a private instance variable or member. And what we're going to do is we're going to define 2 of them, right? Now, question, what type should I use for these operands? They're going to be operand number 1 and operand number 2. What type should I use for now? A? But then I'd have to convert it. right? Remember, I'm getting it from the user interface, right? So my recommendation is, instead of doing that, making it a string, right? Because if you make it a string, you can convert that later, parse it, do all kinds of stuff with it. If you make it a float and you try and do direct conversion, some kind of exception that comes up, right? Either way, you'll have an exception, but you can control it a little better with the string. So I recommend in 2 strings. Now, should I use 2 strings or should I use a string array, right? And then how do you keep track, right? So here's the way. Let's use 2 strings for now, and then we'll talk about the advantages and disadvantages of doing that, and then a string array later. And why would I use a string array? And how do I keep track of the index of the string array, right? I'll tell you why I would use a string array. I'll probably use a string array for this. 1 + 1 - 3 divided by 2 + 6, never, all those kind of things. You can keep adding things to the array, all my operand arrays, adding, and then I just keep moving the pointer to the next operand if I want to, right? The index is what I'm talking about. But for now, let's use, just to make it easy, we'll use, and we'll take a break after this. We'll make 2 strings. So string. Hey, what's the difference between a capital S string and a lowercase s string? Is there a difference in Visual Studio? Huh? Thank you. Same as Java, right? If I use a lowercase, it means something different than uppercase. Uppercase, I'm actually accessing the static class string, where I can do string operations. There's string methods that I can use based on all strings, right? And the lowercase string is the data type, right? So C# sees string as an array of characters that it kind of creates for you in the background, right? Actually, it's a pointer to an array of characters if you really want to go deep into it. But for now, we'll make a string, and we'll call this operand 1, right? You can also call it the first operand if you really want to. It's a private variable. My recommendation is you put an underscore in the front. Underscore, whenever I see underscores in code, to me, instantly I know it's a private variable. And this is good from an automatic recognition perspective. Some people will say, no, I don't like it. It's not my coding style. I don't like to use underscores. It's ugly. Yes, it is, but it kind of tells me that it's the kind of the underlying, the insides of a class. If I look at underscores, it says, hey, be careful because this is a private variable. It's only supposed to be used inside the class. You're not supposed to share directly with members outside of the class, right? That's what it means. All right, so I have a string, and that's 1. And here's another string. Here's operand 2. I also need to know the current operator that I'm running with. Why would I need to know that? If I have multiple operators. We'll get back to this in a second. We'll talk about this, right? I also need to know another thing. I need to know if my dot is currently active or an operator, right? Because I can't put more than 1 decimal at the same time, right? There's many ways to do this. I could set up some kind of Boolean, or I could do a search for a dot inside of my string, and if it exists, I can't put another one, right? I could do one of those 2 things. Which one do you think is best? Should I search for the decimal, or should I keep track of it as a flag, right? What's the advantage and disadvantage to both? Anyone have some opinions? Michael?
If you put a flag on the button itself that says when it's like disabled, like over function lines again.
I could, but then it's disabled. That's not really how our calculators work, right? They don't show disabled.
I mean, if you click it again, it will work, right?
Same thing, right?
Instead of flag.
Yeah, you could do that. That's one way of doing it. What else? What other ways? If I put a flag in, like here in code, right? I can keep track of anytime the button's pressed. Until I do the next operation, it's locked. I can't do another one, right? Until I click until I click a plus or a minus or whatever, I can't add another decimal. I could do that. But I think the fastest way is checking the string, right? Check the string, right? If you check the string to see if there's already a dot in there, if there is, right, you can't put another one, right? But that means that every time I press a button or add a button, a calculator button onto my string, so I'm going to keep doing that, right? Every time I do that, then what I want to do is I want to check, which means that I have to make an event to check that because it's adding new things, or somehow put it inside my code, right? But if I add another button, right? You're right. I can do that for the decimal. That's another way of doing it. That's very good. So you're saying only check when the decimal is pressed because that'll check. Because if I press the decimal 1 time, if it's already there, I check there. So I only check instead of checking every single time. That's way better. Way better. Thank you for that. All right, so let's take a look at this. So now I've got two operands, and I want to keep track of them. Now, curious, for my operand, what's the first thing my operand should check? Is it if my calculator's been used, if there's something else that's in there? For example, if it's a 0, if somehow I'm reading a 0, or if my calculator is not being used somehow, it's not cleared, right? Then I want to start replacing my 0, the default 0, with whatever I have. Somehow I have to do that, right? Now there's different approaches to this, right? I could just replace right away. If I replace right away, I always replace. I don't want to always replace. I want to add, right? So I want to check somehow. I want to search for if my thing has been pressed the first time, right? If it's been pressed. Now there's where a flag might come into play to say calculation is, I'm in the process of calculating something. I've already started pressing my operand for the first time. I've already done my replacement one time or something like that. I might be able to do that. What's another way to do it? And do you guys understand what I'm talking about? Here, let's try it. So I go to my calculator and I press 8 and it replaces 0 with 8, right? But then the next time I press 8, it adds an 8. It doesn't replace it anymore because I'm already started calculating. 0 just means nothing's been calculated. The calculator's been cleared, right? Make sense? So there could be a couple ways I could approach this. I could have a clear flag that says calculator has been clear. And if it's clear, then go ahead, right? If it's not clear, then add, right? That's the other option. Either add or clear, one of the two, right? What's another way of doing it? Any other people have? If
it's 0, then replace it.
If it's 0, which means I got to search, but that means I got to search every time, right? If it's 0, then I got to search every time, right? I don't want to search every time. I only want to search once, right? If the reference has been cleared, right? So how do I do that? If my reset is true, and it's going to start off as true, right? So I'm going to say something like this: Boolean, right? If my reset, right, or clear, let's call it clear. Let's make sure my clear has, if my calculator is clear, you could say that is calculator clear if you really want to. It usually, for Booleans, you do some kind of an action or some kind of question, like is calculator clear, right? That could be a Boolean, and of course it's a private, and I got to put private in front of those other ones. So I'm probably going to put it like this. I'm going to put private. So this is explicitly putting it private. By default, it's private anyway, but I want to put it explicitly like this. And so that's how I write it. Is calculator clear? Now, question. In my calculator form, right? My calculator form triggers whenever my calculator is created, right? And notice that my initialized component, as the components come on board, when I originally do that, I want to definitely set some values to these things, right? And this is a great place for that, initialized component, right? And the other thing I want to kind of do is I want to create another function that's an initialized function, right? This initialized method or function, it's going to be a private method, right? I don't want it to be initialized anywhere else, where I initialize these values again, right? Hey, but we're going to clear the button. We're going to clear all the stuff again. And I want to refer to this method again. So maybe something like create a method that does clear calculator, right? So let's do that. Let's create a method here before my calculator button. Before my calculator button, I'm going to make a method, which is private, void, right? We're going to call it, and again, underscore for all things that are private if we can, right? Which is clear calculator. That's what it's going to do. My clear calculator method, right? It's a private method. And if I use a // right, you can see that it gives me a method summary with no parameters. This method clears the calculator. And resets the variables, right? That's what it does. So what I want to do here, I want to say my this._operand1. Why am I using this keyword? Is equal to this, right? This._operand2 is equal to this, right? And this._ is calculator clear is equal to true, right? I want to do those three things for now, right? So operand 1, operand 2, they're clear. When I clear the button, is calculator clear is true. The other one I want to do is result text box, right, dot text is equal to 0, right? Because that's what I want with my result text box. It's going to go back to 0, whatever it is, right? So it's true by default. And I want to call this clear calculator method after I initialize my component. So I'm going to do something like this dot underscore clear calculator. And this will be, if I want to do some comments, clear the calculator, if you really want to be crazy, right? Now, hey, here's something. Should I really put this comment in, or is it over commenting? What do you think? What is your opinion? Anybody in the back? Anyone? I'll ask some other tables. How about the people over there? Do you think I should put the comment in, or do you guys think is it over commenting? What would you think? I need an opinion, guys. Say yes or no. Is it over commenting or no? The guys in that table right here, the fourth table over here. What do you think? Come on, don't take too long. It's either yes or no. Gamble. Roll the dice. Flip a coin. What do you think? No, it's not over commenting. I heard. How about other opinions? Anybody else have another opinion? Why would this be over commenting? The name is exactly the same. I'm saying here, look, the clear calculator. I'm saying it calculates the clear the calculator. Please don't do this in code. This is way too much. Like, I don't want you to sit there and go, print the form, and then the method is called print form, right? Doesn't make any sense, right? If it's obvious, then you don't have to do this. Please don't do this, right? This is okay because I'm telling it that not only does it clear the calculator out, but it also resets the variables. This is neat. This is a good, some kind of good description. You can also add additional things in there to make it more detailed. But I want to try and keep it to as one line as much as possible, right? All right, so I've kind of got my clear calculator method working. And now, because I've got that, I can test for it. If the calculator is clear, right? If it's not clear, should I test for a positive or a negative? If not calculator is calculator clear, right? Then if it's not clear, then clear it, right? Or if it's not clear, that means replace it. Else, clear it. How should I do it? Or should I say, if calculator is clear, replace it, else do the calculation? What's the best way to do it? Should I do a negative or should I do a positive statement? What would you think is the best practice from a coding perspective? We're talking about coding styles now, right? So again, here's the example. So here's in my operand. I'm starting to talk about my operand. Is I can say something like if this dot underscore is calculated clear, right? Then do something else. Do something else, right? I can do it that way, or I could always do it like this. I could say, if not this is calculator clear, right? Which one is more? Which one? This one, right? You think is this? What's more intuitive for a reader? This one might be easier. What's more intuitive? The other way, the positive statement is always better, right? Try not to do a negative statement as much as possible in code. I know it's weird for me to say this, but negative statements means either you've named the variables wrong, right? Like, for example, I could have named this thing is not clear. Calculator is calculator not clear. If it's true, then da-da-da. That's a positive statement. Is calculator not clear? Although I put the this, right? Which means I only check once. If this, that's true. That's true. That's true. That's true. That means that I'm always going to check, which is going to slow down my calculator functionality in the long run, because my if statement is going to be my positive result is always going to be checked first, right? Okay, here's another question. Is there a way of doing this with another format? Because I'm doing an if-else. I'm checking to see if this is calculator clear, and then I want to do something. Is there another kind of statement I can use here? Well, let's write it the other way, the ugly way first, okay? So here's the ugly way. If this is calculator clear, if it's clear, then I want to replace. So I want to do something like what I did before. Result text box dot text, right, is plus equals to my calculator button dot text, right? That's what I had before. That's if it's clear, that means I've already cleared the calculator. I'm ready to do stuff. I want to replace my stuff, whatever's in there. Sorry, I want to replace it if it's clear. with a new one, right? If it's clear for the first time. So if it's clear, I want to replace, which means not this, it's actually this, right? If it's clear, it means it's 0. It's showing 0 right now, right? And if it's not, then I want to do the plus equals, right? So I want to take the same thing, take a look, right? So I'm going to kind of do one of these, same exact code, except add a plus here. Whoop. That's the difference. There's not a lot of difference here, right? And you got to question yourself when you do something simple like this. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 lines of code, right? Right now, for if it's clear or not clear. And is there a way? First, let's test it to see if this works. The first thing we do is we test our hypothesis. Is this working the same way or the right way? Should it work this way? Let's take a look. So I'm going to run it. I'll run with debugging for now because it's going to build and run. Okay, and replace. We're good, right? Uh-oh. Wait a minute. What happened? I missed something. What did I miss? I got to put something else in here that says it's not clear anymore, right? Because right now the flag is saying it's true. It's clear, right? But now it's not clear. As soon as I do this, as soon as I put in some kind of code for the first time I do this equal sign, it's not clear anymore, right? This means that this dot underscore is calculator clear is equal to false. I need to do that one time, right? Because I need to set that flag the other way. I've started typing in there, and so I got to replace my clear flag to false because now I can start replacing. Okay, make sense? Does anyone not get what I'm doing? This is just basic code. Guys, this is like coding 101. You guys should know this from Java, and if you've done enough code, all I'm doing is setting up variables to keep track of my state. Okay? So the state of my calculator is clear, then it's true. If the state is not clear, then it's false. That's all I'm doing. So now it's not clear anymore because I'm starting to type in there, which means it's being used. Let's try this again. Remember I said testing, right? So okay, here's the test. So 7, and then I add stuff to it, right? It doesn't take it away. In fact, but it'll keep going. Wait a minute. How come these don't work anymore? How come? Because I haven't put any cases for those, right? Right now it doesn't even look at these. All it looks at is these numbers right now, right? So I can't even do an operand, right? All right. Question. When should I store my operand information? The answer should be anytime I go into the operator. Anytime I press an operator key, I'm going to store my operand information. Question number 2, which one should I use? And should I test for if the operand is clear or not? If the first operand is clear, I want to use the second operand, right? This is why it makes sense to use an array, because if I use an array, I can keep moving the pointer forward. My index of the array start at 0, and then it'll go to the next one, and the next one, and then every time I do a new operation, it'll go to the next index in the array, the string array. So I only need one string array that keeps track of all the different operations I want to do, all the operands, I mean, right? Depending on how many times I press the operator. Whoa, okay, I'm going ahead. I'm talking ahead of myself for a second, but you can see how you're making a calculator, and once you start thinking about it, you want to blow your brains out, right? Because it should be easy, but actually it can be quite difficult, right? We're making it difficult. I'm being very specific in my requests. There's ways of making this way simpler, right? And you may have coded it differently. If you've tried it, taking it at home and trying this out, you may have done it totally different than I'm doing it, right? Which is perfectly fine, right? Okay, what's another way of writing this? I'm saying I have a test. Here's the test, right? And what I'm saying is, depending on the test, I want to make the result text box equal to something. And I also want to do something else. Is there a way to write this differently? If I didn't have this in here somehow, right? If I didn't have that, then the answer is yes. I could write something called a ternary operator, where I can write it in all one line with a question mark and a colon. I don't know if you guys ever seen anything like that before. But because I have multiple things I'm doing with one case, this one, I can't. This is the only way I can do this right now. Okay, the only clear way of doing it. Okay, cool. Now you said that it's going to do this more often than this, because it's always going to check this default case. This is the default case in this particular thing. So I could write it, if not this is calculator clear, right? If not this is calculator clear, then do this all the time, because that's what I really want to do more often. That's what you want to try and do. For now, let's leave it like this to make it clear for people who don't understand that not thing. There's going to be some people who don't know, but I don't disagree with you. It means that we may have to rename our variable to make it positive. I always want to put a positive spin on the variable and not a negative. Okay, before I stop for break, we're not going to move on after this. Right now, we're going to stop, and then we're going to talk about it a little bit. We're going to take a short break and go to talk to your grandmothers, like I said before, and people who are great programmers, go for a bio break, grab a coffee or whatever. We're going to take about 10 minutes to do that, right? But let me ask you this question now, going back, right? We got some problems here. We got some issues, right, that we're going to face here, right? So I want to, as soon as I press the operator, I want the operand for now to be saved somewhere. I want it to be saved, right? Whatever operand I put in there, right? And what if I press if I don't press the operand button and press the dot, right? I want to check to see if the dot's already been pressed. If it has been pressed, right, I want to add it in. But what if it hasn't been pressed? And what if no other operand has been used? An example of this would be like here and then dot. See, there's no number. Now it's going to keep the 0. It's not going to replace the 0. That's a different case again. And I'm talking about different kinds of cases to test my code and my user interface, right? That's a possibility I have to deal with. That's an issue for me, right?
Haven't you already structured?
Have I?
Well, I mean, you haven't actually done the work yet.
No, I haven't, right? Because I have to put it.
There's case other.
Yes, which is good. But I have to kind of deal with, if I press the dot, I got to test to see if the dot's already there, number one. If it's not there, I got to do another test. I got to say, what if there's no other operation there? Am I going to just add it on, or do I care? Don't just add it on anyway. If it's not there, just add it on, right? And don't replace. Never replace with the dot. Add on. That's the answer, right? You were going to say something. What were you going to say?
Why do you always want to use positive, not negative?
From a programming perspective, right? I always like to think that positive is better than negative. Okay? I'm talking about from a way we write stuff in code. We always write a positive message instead of is not, right? It's clear, much more clear if I say if this is calculated clear, right? It is. What it means, we think about how to write our variables differently. So the not case is what's going to happen, but we got to think about how to write this negative, right? So how do I write this? So going back to what you just said, how do I write is calculated clear? How do I rename this variable to make it more context, more context related? Well, it makes more sense, right? See, it's a positive thing, right? Is calculator initialized? True, right? Which means it's not clear anymore, right? Same thing, it's just using different words to describe the situation. And I like that one too. I know that this is good, but this is a good exercise for you guys to think about. When you start naming your variables at application development, but I don't want you to use X's and Y's and I's and Z's and whatever, unless you're, like I said, you're doing some kind of coordinate system or imaginary numbers with I's, right? I want you to use these things and make sense of them. Like with the first intuition we have is calculated clear or some kind of message like this, but sometimes our first response is not the best one. All right, let's take a short break. Let's say 10 minutes. And when we come back, we'll continue working with the calculator. And then I want to talk a little bit about the PowerPoints so we can make sure we cover all the little syntax things that you know about C# and answer some of your questions, because you may not still be clear about C# specific syntax. And that's why what I've covered in the 2 PowerPoint presentations. I want to go over them. They're really for your reference. I'm not going to talk too much about them. They're there for you to read. They're excerpts from the book. That's what they are. But if you know C kind of influence language, then you understand a little bit more about C# at this point, okay? Let's come back in 10 or 15.